On the 19th of February, tomorrow, the budget will be announced. Let us make some predictions so that we can check if these predictions can be confirmed or disconfirmed tomorrow. The factors shaping budget allocation include economic indicators, social indicators, external shocks, and other internal structural issues. Let me first share a methodology I've used to predict the 2025 budget. Firstly, I used historiometry, which is historical study of phenomenon, in this case, budget allocation, using statistics. The second methodology I've used is exponential smoothing, a time series forecasting technique that is used to predict future values by calculating a weighted average of past observations. Doing a historiometric analysis, I identified 6 economic cycles in the past 30 years in South Africa. The first one is the 1994 to 1999 post-apartheid era. The second one is 2000 to 2007 commodity-driven growth era. And the third cycle is the 2008-2009 global financial crisis. The fourth one is 2010 to 2019, characterized by internal structural weaknesses, including energy crisis and external shocks. The fifth one is the most fundamental one that has shifted the economic indicators and social indicators in South Africa significantly, the COVID-19 pandemic cycle, 2020 to 2021. And the current cycle, which is the sixth one, the 2022 to 2025, the post-COVID pandemic recovery period. The predictions also are premised on the 3 strategic government priorities announced by our president during the State of the Nation address, SONA. These 3 priorities include to drive inclusive growth and job creation. Number 2, reduce poverty and tackle high cost of living. And the third one is to build a capable and ethical developmental state. So if you look at the graph before you, you will realize that the GDP annual growth rate fluctuated between 1980 to 2023. Around 1980, our growth rate were around 6%. And in 1985, or just before 1985, we see a drastic shift, a dramatic downturn of our GDP. And look at all those fluctuations. They might appear as random fluctuations. I am suggesting through my analysis that these fluctuations are not random. They correspond to the external shocks, to the internal structural issues identified in the 6 cycles. As you can see, the 1994 to 1999 post-apartheid era, we had growth rates fluctuating between 6% and 4%, with a downturn closer to 1994, where we saw a growth rate going down, declining to negative growth. And we see the growth rates surging again. But note the shift, the major shift in the growth rate during the global financial crisis. Also note the effect of the COVID-19 pandemic, where the growth declined sharply to -6%, and the quick recovery in 2021 and 2022. So we are still recovering from the COVID pandemic, and our growth rates are now hovering around 1%. So what will the government announce is going to be shaped by the intention to increase this growth rate to 3%. The next slide shows that the economic policies that have been in place, including the fiscal instruments, have not shifted the unemployment much between 1994 and 2010. In fact, if you look at the graph before us, unemployment rates were hovering around 22% to 23%. over a period between 1994 and 2008, look at the steady increase with 34% unemployment rate registered in 2021 during the pandemic period, and we've not yet managed to reduce unemployment level post the pandemic. So clearly, the budget will be allocated to stimulate employment, which has already been announced in the State of the Nation address. Another very interesting economic indicator is the balance of payments, specifically the current account balance. And that gives us an indication of the health of our economy and the deficits that we can anticipate around these different economic cycles. Interestingly, you would see that the current account increased dramatically around the COVID period. And this can be explained by the fact that we didn't import. There were lockdowns. The imports were limited, and that artificially pushed the current account balance of payment, and it dropped again in 2022, and we are now at minus 5%. This is quite an important statistic, rather trend in our ability to collect revenue from income tax, personal income tax, corporate tax, and value-added tax. Remember that the revenue to fuel the economic activities will come from our revenue base. And my prediction here is that we want to attract investment in South Africa. The budget announced a number, the State of the Nation address announced a number of infrastructure projects. In fact, an amount of 940 billion was announced as an investment that the government will make to stimulate the economy. So my prediction is that the corporate income tax is not going to change. The principles to collect corporate income tax will not change. Personal income tax is already high. My prediction is that that's not going to change, but there will be hikes on sin tax. And I'm predicting that there will be an increase on value-added tax, especially on luxury items, and sin tax will also increase. What will also influence our budget allocation is the central government debt, its percentage to GDP. If you notice, we moved from about 45% around 1994 to over 75% in the current period. And this is a serious consideration because government debt cannot be predicted. It depends on a number of factors, including exchange rates, interest rates. And this is an area of consideration as the budget will seek to navigate a tightrope between stimulating economy and fiscal discipline. This is just to summarize the socioeconomic factors that will shape budget allocation for 2025. In 1994, for instance, spending was influenced by the need to reduce inequality, the need to exercise fiscal discipline to reduce budget deficit, and to maintain debt at manageable levels. But if you look at all these cycles, the first, the second, the third, the fourth, the fifth, and the sixth cycle, there's a common theme that is emerging throughout the 6 cycles. The first one is social spending. The second one is fiscal discipline to reduce budget deficits. The third one is stimulating the economy so that we have decent growth rates to create jobs. And this has not changed in this current cycle. And therefore, the budget prediction for 2025 is that social grant is going to increase to 175 billion, around that figure. The education budget, if you just look at budget allocation in the past 10 years, you see a steady increase from 200 billion in 2013 to over 300 billion in 2023. My prediction is that using exponential smoothing, the budget allocation will be around 320 billion rand. And also because of the announcement of the National Health Insurance Fund and processes to implement that fund, My prediction is that there will be a steady increase from the 2023 allocation from 250 billion. My prediction is that the budget will be allocated to the tune of 260 billion. Infrastructure budget is already been announced. There will be a steady increase from 2023 903 billion to 940 billion. The corporate tax, there will be no changes in my prediction on the principles, on the tax levels and brackets. There won't be any changes that will be announced. Also, when it comes to personal income tax, we don't anticipate any changes. This VAT is where we anticipate significant changes. We anticipate an increase in sin tax. We also anticipate an increase in the value-added tax. Let us see tomorrow if this budget prediction will be confirmed or disconfirmed. All the best.